It's been 2 years, 3 movies, and 3 seasons of Marvel Disney Plus shows since my last MCU hero ranking. Feels like it's time for an update. So today I'm gonna stop and rank all 46 MCU heroes from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all the MCU heroes. To state the obvious, this video will contain spoilers for the entire MCU, and I'm not ranking them based off their power, but based off their character arcs, characterization, and intrigue. You can rank them based off whatever you would like. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. And let's get started. In last place, Lamar, or Battlestar. Now, the actor did a perfectly fine job and the character accomplishes his purpose. But his purpose in the story is just to help us understand John Walker a little bit more. He sees the positive in John Walker that the audience doesn't see.
You already have 3 medals of honor. You consistently make the right decisions in the heat of battle.
He doesn't see the negatives in John Walker that the audience does see, and his character's killed off just to motivate John Walker to use the shield to murder someone in the streets. He doesn't really have much of an arc in and of himself. He's just there to prop up John Walker. He's a plot device. Number 45, New Groot. As much as I love the original Groot, not a big fan of kid or teenage Groot. He's got a bit of a mean streak in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and he's written to be an insufferable teenager in Infinity War who's just whining and complaining throughout the entire film. Now, pretty cool that his arm is what makes up Stormbreaker, that sets up a great moment for Thor, but besides that, this version of Groot hasn't won me over yet. Coming in at number 44 is Quicksilver. It breaks my heart to have him this low on the list because I don't think Aaron Taylor Johnson did anything wrong with his performance. He has some fun banter with Hawkeye, but he's a villain for the first hour and a half of this movie. He's only a hero for about 20 minutes, and then they kill him off. And if they don't care enough about him as a hero to let him live more than 20 minutes as a hero, it's tough for me to rank him particularly high on a hero ranking. I think this is one of the biggest wasted opportunities in the MCU, and I would have loved to have seen more of him. And then maybe they could have done something interesting with WandaVision, but then all of that was just a big tease. Next up, Mantis, a character who's had some cute and funny moments here and there, but whose arc is basically being complicit and feeling mildly guilty about killing thousands of Starlord siblings to being a ride along with the Guardians of the Galaxy. She did try to put Thanos to sleep, so it's kind of a nice moment, but we haven't really gotten to know what makes her tick, seen her do anything particularly heroic, so I can't put her high on the list. 42, Korg. This is a character that I included because he was one of our Revengers, thus he does qualify as a hero. He's a lot more of a comic relief side character though. He seems to help Thor in his Fortnite games. He has gotten in a little bit of action, but his primary role is putting a grin on my face from time to time, and he's good at doing that. Then we have Wong. To be clear, I don't think they've done anything wrong with the character of Wong. Benedict plays him really well. He's got a great rapport with Doctor Strange. And beyond that, with his addition in Shang Chi and appearing in the No Way Home trailer, he's becoming one of these characters that's just a nice addition to the MCU as a whole, as a character in and of himself, and not just a sidekick to Doctor Strange. Problem here is that he is a side character. He hasn't been given a character arc at any one point in time, and I was really hoping that they would use him a little bit more in Endgame, but that's not what ended up happening. So, solid addition to the MCU, but not a major player yet. Kicking off our top 40, Captain Marvel. Of our lead title characters, she's easily my least favorite. The way she was written in her own film, she had amnesia and everyone was telling her how to behave and she was discovering who she was. So we never really got to know her all that well. We just knew she was powerful and feisty, and I thought maybe in Endgame we'd get to know her a little bit more. Nope, not really. And in fact, the way she's written in Endgame is even worse because she's written to be condescending towards characters that are more established and that we like more, that just makes her come off lacking in any compassion and doesn't remotely make her likable at all. And most importantly, I did not like her new haircut. in Endgame, and that probably knocked her back 20 spots on this list. Number 39, Shuri, a cute and fun character. Some people didn't like the sneakers pun. I thought it was funny. She's also a character that gets in on the action. Now, I think they might have overplayed her intelligence card because they've written her to be exponentially smarter than all the other established characters who are designed to be exponentially smarter than everyone else in the world, but it works well enough. They haven't really given her an arc yet. She's more of a plot device with a fun personality, but that'll probably change with Wakanda Forever coming out next year. Moving along, Valkyrie, a character with not a ton of screen time that's had quite the character arc. She starts off as this washed up, burned out hero. She becomes a revenger, and then by the end of Endgame, she's the person running Asgard. So while we don't know too much about her, she doesn't have the flashiest personality. They've done some interesting things with her. Coming in at 37 is M'Baku, character that once again, without a ton of screen time, has been given a solid arc. At first, he's the leader of the distant Jabari tribe that have a bit of an antagonistic relationship with T'Challa, and then he becomes kind of the rescuer in that, and then an ally both at the end of Black Panther as well as going into Infinity War. He's also given some solid one-liners.
One more word, and I will feed you to my children. I'm kidding, we are vegetarians.
So a character that I'm excited to see more from. Number 36, Monica Rambeau, one of the newest heroines in the MCU, but a character that's been around for a few years because we saw her as a child in Captain Marvel. She's used to give a different perspective on the characters and the stories being told, whether that's Captain Marvel interacting with a child or just her role in WandaVision as someone that was in the sitcoms themselves and battling with the organizations and everything like that, having a less cynical worldview and getting her little superhero origin story. We haven't gotten a lot of time to really get to know her yet, but I'd be interested to see what they're going to do with her in the Marvels. Next up, Nebula, one of the characters most improved by Endgame. Prior to that film, she was a character almost entirely defined by her relationship to other people, and because of that, I found her pretty obnoxious and annoying because she was just this one-note character that hated her father and her sister. But with Endgame, they removed her from that context and allowed her to kind of develop on her own. And we kind of get to see two different timelines of her and how she changed when stopped allowing others to define her. So much improved. Number 34, Wasp, a character with a bunch of potential that I don't think they've fully tapped into yet. Thus far, she's basically existed to be a counterbalance to Scott Lang's personality. So he's goofy, unorthodox, untrained, and so she's stiff and serious. Inherently, that kind of makes her also not have the most interesting personality. Likewise, she's already been trained to be a superhero before the story starts. Therefore, she doesn't have this journey to become a hero. She's just waiting for permission to be a hero from her father, which in and of itself has certain problems related to it. So she's someone that I'm excited to see her do more and get more of an arc, but she hasn't quite gotten it yet. Number 33, Melina, an older generation Black Widow that's the only mother that Natasha ever really knew. She ignored all the atrocities around her and the implications of the work that she was doing. But when she was reunited with the two daughters that weren't really hers in the first place, her eyes are opened that she should be on the other side and decides to do the right thing finally. It's an effective enough character arc. While she's not the flashiest of characters, she fits nicely into the movie and as an additional piece of our understanding of who Natasha is. Then we have Okoye, one of the side characters who's been given a little bit more meat for her roles. In particular, in Black Panther, her character is used to demonstrate the conflicting values and loyalties when Killmonger takes over the kingdom. Add to that, she gets some nice little one-liners here and there. She gets in on the action, so a character that is a side character, but one that's used really nicely. Number 31, Sylvie, a female variant of Loki who exists for the purpose of revenge. Her Her entire existence has been on the run, and she's looking to take down the TVA because of it. But when she interacts with Loki Phase 1, they have this interesting bond where we get to know Loki in this whole other new way and dive into his psychology through seeing this other version of him with a radically different life. So a character that in certain senses is kind of one-dimensional because her existence is so simplistic, but in another sense reveals so much about a character that we've been around for a long time. We've made it to the top 30 with Peggy Carter. She's a World War II hero, a love interest for Steve Rogers, as well as one of the first members of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's a character that was only a lead in one movie in the MCU, but they keep coming back to her, whether giving her her own TV show, giving her her own Marvel one-shot, or having her appear in Endgame and Ant-Man and What If, because she's a character that made a dramatic impact on Steve Rogers as well as the MCU as a whole. 29, Pepper Potts. When I first did these MCU rankings, I didn't include her, but the Russos decided to include her in an Iron Man suit in the finale of Endgame, so it seemed like, of course, she belonged on a Heroes ranking. But beyond that, she was given superpowers in Iron Man 3 and saved Tony. So while primarily she's used as a love interest for him, someone that's always been the voice of reason, always believed in him, and always wanted the best for him, she's also had those moments where she stepped into action to do the right thing. Next up, John Walker, Captain America 2, or U.S. Agent. Now, he's an interesting one because he was used somewhat as an antagonist in Falcon and the Winter Soldier and murders someone with the Captain America shield.
Because that's what heroes do.
But the reason he had the Captain America shield is because he was Captain America during most of the show, and whether you liked it or not, was given a redemptive arc by the end of the season. Certainly, a lot of people hated this character, but you were supposed to. He's used essentially as an example of what if they had given a bully the Captain America Super Soldier Serum. The Doctor in Captain America the First Avenger warned against doing that. That's why he wanted to give it to Steve Rogers, and now we get John Walker, who is one of those alpha males that the Doctor warned against. He's not a bad guy necessarily, but he's not worthy of the shield or the super soldier serum, and that's what makes him interesting. They give us just enough of his backstory as this very complicated person that wants to do the right thing, has a bunch of insecurities, but given the power, does the wrong thing with it. And so I'm actually very interested to see what they're going to do with U.S. Agent in the future. While we're on the subject of alternate Captain Americas, let's go with Red Guardian, the Russian Captain America. And I just thought that this character was a lot of fun. He's very boneheaded, he's very selfish, he's clueless to a lot of things around him, and he has a very myopic worldview. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't actually care about these girls. He gets a great set of jokes inside of it, and he has this interesting arc as he comes around to realize just how clueless he's been and decides to do the right thing later on in the film. I really wish they'd given him a little bit more action and a few more moments to be the hero that stands out and uses skill sets in a less bumbling sort of way. And if they had, I would have shot him up this list a few spots, but there was a bit of a wasted opportunity there. 26, War Machine, one of the most underutilized characters in the entire MCU. He's been around in the MCU as long as Tony Stark and lived on beyond him, and therefore he made even an appearance in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which he got an Emmy nomination for his one scene in that show for some reason. Here I am! But he's always the side character. In all of his Iron Man appearances, he's just trying to get Tony Stark to behave or follow specific rules. It wasn't until Endgame where he's given his own plot line and able to stand on his own with a kind of little mini mission with Nebula. So a character that I'm excited to see what they're going to do with him in his upcoming TV show to see if he can actually stand out finally. Then we have Shang Chi. Now, if you haven't seen the movie Shang Chi yet, go ahead and skip forward about 30 seconds. I will be talking spoilers about it. One of the more complicated MCU origin stories that we've had up to this point in time, because as a child, he was trained to be an assassin, sent by his father to go kill someone, and he did it, and therefore he spent his life running from his past, the atrocity that he did commit, and the legacy that he's a part of, and the stories of him discovering what it means to use his skill, his potential, and his power for good and write his own legacy. That's pretty powerful stuff there. And he also has a lot of nice dynamic rapport with Awkwafina, though she's the more charismatic of the two. I wish that he was given a little bit more a stronger personality that popped a little bit more, but a character that I'm very excited to see establish himself in the MCU. Number 24, Mobius M. Mobius, an absolutely fascinating character in that he works for a bureaucratic organization, but he still has a rebellious streak inside of him. He loves the fact that his job clearly defines his purpose, but at the same time, he goes against their wills very frequently, and when he discovers what's really going on and the truth, he's willing to put himself on the line, be pruned and destroyed as far as he knows because it's the right thing to do. Add to that, he just has fantastic chemistry with Loki.
Big metaphor guy. I love it. Makes you sound super smart.
I am smart.
I know.
And they're just sitting there discussing things, reveals so much about each of them, and little details about him, like his love for jet skis, just make him so endearing. But he's also someone that gets in on the action and does heroic things to try and stop the TVA, so he does belong on this list. We've made it to the middle point of the list with Starlord, and this is a frustrating one for me because I loved Starlord and Chris Pratt's portrayal of him in the original Guardians of the Galaxy. He's this reluctant hero that becomes this leader of this ragtag group that become Guardians of the Galaxy. And they did develop his character in Volume 2 as well as Infinity War, but I think there were a lot of missteps in the process. In Volume 2, they reveal him to being half cosmic in nature and give him these enormous powers, only to take them away 10 minutes later. And then in Infinity War, he gets some great banter with Thor.
Are you mocking me? Are you mocking me? Stop it, you just did it again.
And some solid moments with Gamora, but he's written to be so insecure and unhinged in that movie that he's literally responsible for half the universe dying. And so as much as I love the character and want to put him higher up, they've just had too many missteps in what they've done with him. 22, Gamora. If Nebula was one of the characters most improved by Endgame, Gamora was one of the characters most improved by Infinity War. Prior to Infinity War, she had a bit of a dull characterization. You know, she had a complicated relationship with Thanos, but it wasn't really fleshed out all that much. And because she's so serious, she's not the most interesting character on screen. But with Infinity War, they really dove into that backstory and what her exact relationship was with Thanos as well as Nebula and how complicated it really got, and it just made her a lot more interesting. She's still not the most charismatic of characters, so I can't put her terribly high on the list, but someone that fleshed out the story quite a bit. Number 21, Falcon or Captain America 3, a side character to Captain America that was then promoted to Captain America. As the side character, he had a nice dynamic with Steve Rogers because he respected him, but he wasn't enamored with the legend of Captain America, so they were able to have a mutual respect for one another. Then, as he was promoted to Captain America with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think they did a nice job of treating him as the everyman that was this star of a superhero. And so you see him as someone with a sister and personal problems, even questions of where does the money come from, and dealing with the legacy that carries a lot of different meanings to a lot of different people. Now, I think some of the execution of that in the show, there were some problems with it. I had issues with the show as a whole, but the idea of the arc that they gave him, I actually really like, and they've brought him on quite the journey in his time in the MCU. Kicking off the top 20, Yelena, a new character introduced in Black Widow, who stole the show from Natasha, the established Black Widow. She was just given such a great personality that in every interaction, she was the person that you were focused in on.
Why do you always do that thing?
What thing?
The pose. It's a fighting pose.
But then beyond that, this dynamic of Natasha's fake family that she had, fleshes out her character really interesting, but gives each of those people an interesting arc in that Elena being just a few years younger, didn't know that she had this fake family and then was turned over to these sick spy people that basically stole her life from her. And we learned that Natasha didn't go back to save her, which is just an interesting arc to give each of their characters and fascinating dynamics. So one of these characters that we've only seen in one movie, I thought it was a great introduction, and I can't wait to see what's next. Number 19, Hawkeye, another one of the characters most improved by Endgame. Prior to that film, he was always a character that was kind of sidelined, especially in the first Avengers. And the most interesting thing about him is that his day life was super normal. He just has a house with a wife and kids.
The city's flying. We're fighting an army of robots, and I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes sense.
And finally, with Endgame, they gave him his own mini arc, whereas he lost his entire family in the snap, and therefore he just became this vicious killer that doesn't think he deserves to live anymore. But because of that, he's also the person that had the most to live for if they were successful in what they did in that movie. And it was just such an interesting character development for him that humanized what Thanos did. It was the right piece for his character and the right piece for that movie. And because he hasn't gotten a ton of time in the spotlight, I'm very fascinated to see his show this fall. Number 18, Drax. This is another character I wish I could have him higher up on this list because in a lot of ways, he is a personal favorite. Seeing him and his sense of humor in the first Guardians of the Galaxy was just one of the most pleasant surprises I have ever had in a theater.
That's when you...
Why would I put my finger on his throat?
But it feels like they haven't known what to do with him since then. So all they have are the goofy jokes, which some of them are hilarious.
Where is Gamora?
Yeah, I'll do you one better. Who's Gamora?
I'll do you one better. Why is Gamora?
And his desire to kill Thanos. But in Endgame, we saw Thanos killed 2 different times, and he wasn't really a part of either one of those times killing him. So he's a character where it seems like they don't know what to do with him now. So he's been wasted ever since Guardians of the Galaxy. Next up, Bucky, or the Winter Soldier. Now, this is a character that's been a war hero, a villain, an anti-hero, and now he's back to being a hero again. He's been along for the ride for a very long time and used in a bunch of different ways, but at the same time, he's a character that always feels a little bit distant. Even in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where we get to spend time with him in his day life and some therapy sessions, his arc gets sidelined all throughout the middle of the show. It's just used to bookend it. So he's someone that I still wish we got to know him just a little bit better, but he is just like a solid addition, a solid performer all throughout the MCU. 16, Groot. Now this character is one of the biggest gambles in the entire MCU, as he's a talking tree that only says, I am Groot. But James Gunn absolutely managed to turn a talking tree into this heartfelt character that you really cared about, that you felt had a sincere connection to the other Guardians of the Galaxy, so much so that when you get to the finale of the film and he sacrifices himself with a sappy line like, "We are Groot," it becomes one of the most heartwarming moments in the entire MCU, as well as one of the saddest moments when you see Rocket's reaction to it. And that's a real achievement when you can take a character with so many limitations as Groot has, that's so weird, and tell such a human story with that character. Number 15, Nick Fury, the backbone of the MCU, this mysterious character that brought together the Avengers, that he's always up to something, but you know that he's headed in the right direction.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
In certain ways, in the present timeline of the MCU, he's a character who's fairly locked in his personality, but by doing things like using him in Captain Marvel, they've managed to develop him and show a version of him that was less cynical and less world-weary. and just a nice little way to use a character. And while he's very rarely front and center, he's always a nice addition. Of course, Samuel L. Jackson just has so much screen presence that he's always someone that stands out. Then we have Rocket Raccoon, a character that I have a love-hate relationship with because he's so self-destructive at times that he drives me absolutely insane. But it's that self-destructive streak that makes his heroic moments that much more satisfying. He's someone that in many ways can be so incredibly selfish, but he also does care about the people around him at the same time. Therefore, when you get to Endgame and he loses everyone, and you see him as this broken character doing whatever he can to rescue his friends, there's something very compelling about that. It's not necessarily the biggest arc of Endgame or the MCU, but a character that's so fascinating because of his brokenness. 13, Yondu, one of the best scene stealers from the first Guardians of the Galaxy, is given a bunch of complex character development throughout Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, through a series of revelations of what actually went down with him and Starlord and his taking him, what was really going on, and the consequences that it had for Yondu as a character. They just develop him so much more as this broken man, as well as this fatherly figure inside of Peter Jason Quill's life. So much so that Groot via Rocket welcomes him into the Guardians of the freaking Galaxy, except he didn't say freaking. Also, he does a killer Mary Poppins impression.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
Number 12, Black Panther, one of the most unique characters on this list, as he's a king trying to take care of his people. He has superpowers, but they're largely for the purpose of his royal responsibilities. He's also someone that in two of his different appearances, he's been used as part of morality tales. In Civil War, he's out for revenge and has to learn to forgive. And then in Black Panther, part of his journey throughout the film is deciding that Wakanda has been in the wrong in not helping the rest of the world. And though he's out to stop Killmonger, he is transformed through what Killmonger is communicating to him. And that's just a little bit fascinating. I think he would be a little bit higher on the list, except as a character, he's a bit of a dull personality. He's a little bit one note, and so kind of holds him back from being like one of the most fun characters to see on screen. Then we have Vision, an inherently interesting character because of his origin. Their ties back to Jarvis and an Infinity Stone, and as soon as he appears, he's able to pick up Mjolnir and thus establish that he is worthy. That's just such a distinct and interesting character. Beyond that, he was a scene stealer as when he's in the action because he's so powerful, and then just in his dialogue with other characters, he's constantly doing interesting things and saying things in a captivating way. Now, real Vision in his original form felt was largely underutilized because he was killed off so early in Infinity War, or nerfed out at the beginning of the movie and then killed by the end of it. But when they brought him back as fake Vision in WandaVision, you get this amazing rom-com, sitcom situation between the two of them that made him captivating and interesting in an entirely new way. So one of the weirdest characters in the MCU that's been used in bizarre ways, and in some ways finds potential that you never thought was there, wastes the obvious potential, and so an odd mix, but a great character nonetheless. Finally, we've made it to the top 10 with Ant-Man, one of the most light-hearted and innocent characters in the entire MCU, which is kind of funny because he's an ex-con. He's not trying to be the biggest hero out there. He's just trying to do the right thing, make up for some past mistakes, and be a good father to his daughter. Of course, you got Paul Rudd playing him, and he's just so effortlessly likable and organically funny that he just brings so much joy to every single scene. And Ant-Man was the guy that kind of brought that whole time travel idea to the Avengers to stop Thanos and that whole snap thing that he came up with. So one of the most pleasant additions on this list. Sorry, I had to include at least one ant pun. Number 9, Scarlet Witch, one of the most morally complex characters on this list. She starts out as a villain working with Hydra, eventually becomes an Avenger, but through her actions accidentally kills a bunch of people. And all throughout her journey, she's constantly losing the people that she cares about the most.
I can't feel you.
Of course, this leads to the scenario in WandaVision where she's both the lead character and the villain of the show at the exact same time because she's so broken and grieving that she turns in a very dark direction to try and find comfort at that point in time. So she's a character that might turn back into a villain, might turn back into a great hero. She had an awesome throwdown with Thanos.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
You will.
That caused him to rain fire on his own troops. You never really know exactly where she's going to land because of the complexities of everything going on with her, and that's what makes her a very interesting character. Next up, Doctor Strange. Ever since they introduced him in his film, I have loved all the little bits of him that we've gotten throughout the years. In his film, we see this arrogant, egotistical doctor become broken and search the world for a way to fix himself, and in doing so finds a greater purpose where he becomes this powerful sorcerer that can save our reality. And in doing so, he never sheds the arrogance, which when he starts interacting with Thor and Tony Stark, they're just these amazing back and forth moments of banter. Add to that just the way that he's used in Infinity War and Endgame as the person that's able to see all these different things and says just the right things to Tony Stark to set him down the path that leads to victory. Just loved all of that stuff. And as of the time I'm recording this, just yesterday, his episode of What If dropped, and I thought that might be the best episode of the show thus far in this tragic exploration of what drives him and how far and recklessly he could pursue something if he was broken enough. So a really cool character that, man, I can't wait to see what they're going to do with him in Spider-Man as well as his second film next year. Number 7, Thor. This is another tricky one because obviously he's one of our main Avengers. He's gotten so many awesome moments in his time in the MCU, and at times has been just given these heartbreaking arcs, especially throughout Thor Ragnarok into Infinity War. It's awesome stuff, but I think he's the most inconsistently written of our main characters. If you see his characterization in the original Thor versus the Ragnarok, followed by Infinity War, followed by the big Thor Bowski in Endgame, they are all over the place with this character, and it doesn't feel like the same character with a through line to it. It feels like them searching for what's the best way to use him in each film. So as much as he's an awesome character at times, he's an inconsistent one. Then we have Black Widow, one of the most slowly developed characters in the entire MCU. She's introduced in Iron Man 2 as basically a mysterious pretty face that can fight, and then over the next few years, they kept giving us more and more pieces about her backstory, the people that she tied to, and helped us to understand that she's trying to make amends for all of the horrible things that she did in the past.
And what are you now?
I got red in my ledger. I'd like to wipe it out.
Your ledger is dripping. It's gushing red, and you think saving a man no more virtuous than yourself will change anything?
And finally, over 10 years after she was introduced in the MCU, they gave her her own film where they really flesh out exactly what were these horrible things that she did, and that she was responsible in her mind for killing someone, an innocent girl, as well as abandoning her own sister, at least the sister that she thought she had, and she's trying to do right by all of that. So a character that wasn't the most interesting at first, but they just kept adding layers and layers to her and showing how she actually did care about the people around her in interesting ways. Kicking off our top 5, Hulk. Now, like Thor, this is a character that's had a number of different phases and characterizations, but unlike Thor, I feel like there's a progressive building of the character rather than ups and downs, backs and forths, and regressions. He starts out as someone trying to undo what's been done to him that's on the run, and then he's someone that kind of has control of Hulk, and then eventually Hulk takes over, and then by the time we get to Endgame, he's just figured out how to combine the two together and accept who he is. And then if you've seen Shang Chi, we see him back in Bruce Banner form, though we don't know exactly what that means. And I know some people didn't like Professor Hulk. After a few minutes of adjusting to it, I didn't really mind it at all. And so he's a character that they've continually evolved who he is. They haven't just repeated any plot beats with him. We've seen him in a bunch of different ways in a bunch of different scenarios. He's torn stuff to pieces. He's been one of the smartest people in the room. He's been one of the dumbest people in the room. He's been all of the different things, all of it a lot of fun, at least in my mind. In fourth place, Loki, along with Wanda, one of the most morally complex characters on this list, as sometimes he's the villain and a sociopath, other times he's an anti-hero, and sometimes we see him just doing the right thing. He's someone who has never been able to accept himself or figure out his place in this world. He just believes he exists for some glorious purpose, and he's working to find out what that is. And as much as he rebels against his family and has this conflicting relationship with Thor, he really does care about his family and his brother at the exact same time. And what they've been able to do over the last 5 years with his use in Ragnarok as well as Loki is show multiple redemptive paths for this deeply broken character and show that in the right context, he can move away from all of his narcissism and work to do the right thing. What makes him such an interesting character is he's not clear, good and bad. There's a little bit of everything in there, but at the right times, he's made the choices to be the hero. Real quick, before I give you my top 3, are you up for the challenge? Share your ranking of all 46 MCU heroes. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, if you enjoy this type of content, I've done a ton of MCU rankings, the villains, the final battles, of course, the movies. You can check those out right up here. Also, in a couple of days, I'm gonna do a top Marvel movie bracket showdown with 8 of the top MCU films versus 8 top non-MCU films, smashing them together in a bunch of showdowns. It's going to be a ton of fun. Hope you can check that one out. In third place, Spider-Man. Peter Parker is probably one of the most relatable and instantly likable characters in all of the Marvel canon because he is so down to earth. He's a high school kid given extraordinary powers and sent off on a bunch of adventures, and I think Tom Holland absolutely captures that dynamic. He's fun, but he's also immature, and therefore he just provides this energy to these movies and a different perspective on the world of the MCU. So much so that I wish they'd let him have one of his standalone movies where they didn't need to prop it up with other heroes from the MCU. Just let him have a normal adventure and put him front and center. They want to put Doctor Strange and Iron Man and Nick Fury in his movies. Fair enough if that's what they want to do. I think they're doing a great job with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But then again, Peter Parker's a tough character to not get right because he is so likable and fun. Our runner-up, Steve Rogers, the original Captain America. A good, old-fashioned hero. He wasn't motivated to become a soldier or hero out of some sort of external trauma or motivation. He did it because he thought it was the right thing to do and had a responsibility to serve if others were serving. Some people think that good-hearted nature of him makes him a boring character, but I think that's exactly what makes him interesting. Not every hero needs to be deeply broken and motivated by some redemptive arc. Sometimes there's something inspiring inspiring about someone who just has a good moral compass and wants to do the right thing, that actually can see a situation and work out what is right and what is wrong and stand by their convictions. And that's who Steve Rogers is. He has his faults, but they're not always overt. He's loyal to his friends and he tries to be consistent with himself. And I felt they've found just the right way to close out his arc, where after a life of selfishness and giving to others to try and save the world, allowing him to have something for himself and sending him back to be with Peggy, I thought that was just a nice little touch. Some people said it's out of character that he would stop being the hero, but there's no reason he would have to stop being a hero just because he was with her. So I thought it was a great full arc for his character. But our winner, Tony Stark, Iron Man. For me, he's the character with the fullest character arc. He had big, gigantic flaws when he was introduced, and he continued to have flaws all throughout his time in the MCU, but they were constantly developing the character and showing someone trying to learn and grow and be a better version of himself. Beyond that, he just has such a distinct and charismatic personality, and Robert Downey Jr., as an addition to any scene, makes everyone else more fun and interesting because of his great chemistry with everyone. But it really is that arc that puts him on top for me. If you go back and rewatch the first Iron Man in light of Endgame, there's so many lines of dialogue that just have so much more impact in meeting. In particular, the discussions in the cave as they're building the first suit, and then later in the film when he's talking about Pepper, where she's so worried about what he's doing.
You're gonna kill yourself, Tony. I'm not gonna be a part of it.
I shouldn't be alive, unless it was for a reason. I just finally know what I have to do.
And you see the ultimate fulfillment of that in his actions in Endgame. And even the way they handled the conclusion to his story by allowing him 5 years of peace where he has a family and a daughter and finds happiness, and he has something to lose by choosing to be the hero again and make that final sacrifice. It's like such a tragic moment, but such a satisfying one at the same time. So for me, he's the character that just made every movie better, that stole almost every scene that he was in, and was given such a profound arc throughout these films. So for me, without question, he comes in at number 1. Remember, if you like this video, I've got more like it. They're right over there in that playlist, a ranking of the movies, final battles, favorite moments, villains, all that fun stuff right over there. Plus, I have a top Marvel movie bracket showdown coming in just a few days. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.